Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another Disney vs. Original Work Friday. And yes, we are talking about 101 Dalmatians, and I have somewhat a plate to cover, so let me begin by kind of giving you sort of an idea as to how the plots are structured and how they're fairly differently structured, and how some of the characters as well are differently structured. And there's also some similarities within this work as well. It's sort of like thoroughly mixed together as far as this one's concerned. It's not completely out there, so hopefully I'll be able to explain this as concise and consistent as I can. Now, what you need to know about 101 Dalmatians is that it actually was a novel written by Dudie Smith, and basically certain things within this particular work try to give you sort of the same overall plot. Like, there's this villain named Cruella de Vil who wants to get puppies and use them to make fur coats. That's basically, you know, the gist, and they both really stick to that plot. It's just some major details seem to be somehow constructed differently. So basically what you have to understand is that in the original work, it sort of starts off with the couple who have the Dalmatians. They are already established to be together and in a house living together, whereas in the Disney version you kind of see the guy who has the boy dog, or boy Dalmatian, and how he meets a woman who has a girl Dalmatian, and that's how they kind of started off, as them being separate, and then the dog realizing, okay, maybe I should find somebody so we cannot just be lonely, living in this lonely bachelor life. So basically he sets up his owner, which is rather amusing. And what you also have to understand is that it seems like Disney did try to take this one seriously, in the sense of trying to show the fact that the dogs in particular consider their owners to be pets. And that's the same thing in the novel. It's that same kind of idea, that the dogs have their own kind of a world, basically. And it doesn't try to shine away from that. So it is fairly consistent at that. But as far as the beginning of the plot's concerned, the Disney version sort of starts out with the two with the couple being separate and then coming together, and them both having the same gender dogs, or corresponding to their gender, and so therefore, you know, the puppies can have puppies and the humans can be together too and form a family. So it's kind of like that same idea. However, you have to understand is that there's also different names. Disney, I think, really wanted to kind of scrap the names here. The person, or the owner, the human male, is identified as Mr. Durley, but in the Disney work he's called Roger Radcliffe. So I guess Disney really wanted to, like, push the envelope. Well, we're not going to even make it sound like Dearly or have him have the last name Dearly. We're just going to totally scrap his name. So they totally scrapped his name, and not only his name, but his career. In the Disney version, Roger Radcliffe is a musician. Yes, a musician. And he's actually one of the only Disney characters who actually makes up the Cruella de Vil song, which you will see in the Disney version. But in the original version, he is a financial wizard, and he has been granted lifelong tax exemption and lent a house on the outer circle of Regent's Park. And they do kind of emphasize this too, that he does live somewhere in Regent's Park in in London, according to the Disney version. And in return for wiping out government debt, so he's kind of responsible for making sure everything is kind of kept in line in that sense, but totally different profession. And I found that to be sort of interesting. Now there's also something else really good to note. They also changed a name in the Disney version for the female dog. The female dog in the Disney version is Perdita. However, you will see how in the original novel there is a Perdita, but it's not the female dog who ends up marrying Pongo, who is the male dog, but Pongo is basically the same in both versions. But Mrs. is the one who marries, or who bears Pongo's kids, basically. And she bears 15. Again, the same number as the Disney version. However, she's not able to feed all of them, so Miss Dearly, but in the Disney version she's called Anita. In the novel, Miss Dearly tries to find somebody who can nurse the rest of the puppies, and she finds this other Dalmatian who is female, whose name is Bernita, or it's hard to pronounce people's names here. I want to make sure I get them right. I believe it's Perdita. But basically she finds her in the pouring rain and sort of nurses her back to health. And yeah, she helps Mrs. assist with the babies, and basically she's kind of treated as another character, Perdita. So there's this whole other character named Perdita who's in the original work, but in Disney none of that happens. There is no other female really female dog that's necessarily involved much at all, if any. It's just Mrs., but Mrs. is called Perdita. So again, something very interesting to note. I find it interesting that Disney kind of decided to scrap that, but I think they figured that it would make it a little bit more consistent. Also, you have to understand, as going through this plot and how I'm explaining it to you, is that in the original version they kind of deal with this issue of making sure that Mrs. can take care of all the puppies because they're 15. But in the Disney version they kind of act like it's not really such a big deal, like, oh, we have 15 puppies, it's okay. But there is one part where there is this dog that comes out and they think it's dead, and Roger tries to sort of revive it. So that's basically the only kind of real sort of struggle that they have as far as the puppies are concerned. They just want to make sure all of them are alive. And it's kind of sort of maybe hinted in the Disney version that Roger and Anita are not really so well off. But they do seem to care and do seem to want to support the puppies, and you know, they seem to be very dog-like people. So I guess it would definitely make sense in this case. And also how Cruella de Vil comes into play is very different. In the Disney version, she's just played out as a dearly devoted old schoolmate of Anita. And basically, when Cruella de Vil comes into the house, she literally like just comes into the house. Once she starts hearing about puppies and dogs, she's like, I need to be here. And the way the Disney version presents itself and showing her and having this kind of design is just, I find very fascinating, because she just looks like somebody that you would see who is maybe on the borderline of being a little bit crazy. Because she actually kind of comes into the house, it's almost like she's very sort of aggressive, on that front, as she's even willing to just come to Anita and Roger's house to hear about what's really going on, and hearing and seeing if she could use these dogs as a means for her fur. And you really will get the sense in the Disney version of how she loves her fur. But basically how Cruella de Vil is introduced in the original novel is basically Mr. and Mrs. Dearly are invited to a party, and that's basically where they meet Cruella de Vil, and she's basically the host, and she is basically put in sort of the same context as in the Disney version. She's intimidating, and she's wealthy, and she is fixated on fur, and there's also a point where she mentions at the party that she thinks that animals are worthless and that they should be drowned. There's really no mention of this in the Disney version, although she does kind of mention later on, like, I don't care what you do, just kill them. But it's not really mentioned that she just doesn't really consider them, I guess, as maybe worthless. I think in the Disney version she sort of plays them out as this they can be useful for her, in that they could be used to make fur coats. And a certain kind of fur coats, if you know what I mean, because in the Disney version she doesn't want the fur coats until they got spots on them, because for some reason spots are just so cool. So that's really how her character sort of played. In the original work, she just kind of is like, yeah, I don't care about animals, you know, if it means that I can, you know, kill them for my own pleasure, then whatever. But I think in the Disney version, she doesn't care about really whether they live or die. What she cares about is if she could use them. So I think that's kind of a little bit of a difference that could be noted. And then after this dinner party occurs, that's when the puppies go missing. But you will see in the Disney version, Cruella de Vil doesn't come once, she comes twice. She first comes before the puppies are born, and then she realizes, oh, you guys are expecting puppies to come at some point. And then she says, like, ooh, I'll come back in 3 weeks. And then she's like, I'll see you in 3 weeks, and I'll come back here and see you about the puppies. And you really get the sense of the desperation she is to really use these puppies. And then the second time when she comes, that's when you see how she kind of goes, they're not spotted, you know, they're useless to me. But then they kind of reveal to her, they're gonna get their spots. And then she kind of goes, maybe I can use them, you know. She is kind of played as this very villainous, type-esque, not necessarily the most kindest to animals, and basically that's how Disney kind of plays into her character. It seems like in the original version she already knows that these puppies are there, she already knows that they have dogs, and she basically is in charge of having them disappear, similar to the Disney version. And they also use the same kind of terminology for certain things, instead of some things that are kind of different when I'm telling you with the names. In the original work as well as in the Disney work, there is this mention of the twilight bark. And once the puppies go missing, you hear all of this barking and all of this stuff, and the dogs try to use that as a form of communication so that they can kind of go across the country and see if they can track down where these puppies are. And basically it plays out in the same way. They're held out in Hell Hall, which is basically sort of Cruella de Vil's fam ancestral home in Suffolk. And then Pongo and Mrs. in the original work do the same thing in the Disney work. They try to see if they can communicate themselves out there and try to see if they can find the puppies, and then they realize that they need to go on their own and look for the puppies because the humans, you know, don't really understand them, so they go out on their own to find their puppies. And then and basically once they journey across, they meet the Colonel, who's the same thing as in the Disney work. Same dog, I'm pretty sure, from what I can tell. Same kind of dog, I mean. He's like an old English sheepdog, and I think the Disney version plays him out as an old sheepdog. And he basically plays out into the same way that they find this hell hall, and they actually learn that there's 97 puppies. In the Disney work, they say 99, and I'll kind of explain that towards when I explain sort of the ending to this. But basically, you know, all the puppies are being held there, and Cruella de Vil tells them, you know, that the papers are kind of going viral here. We need to like get rid of these puppies before anybody finds out anything. So basically she tells her henchmen to get rid of them, and she basically tells them to do whatever they can, just do it. And basically that's the same thing in the Disney version as well. And then basically the puppies escape, and along with their parents, and you kind of get the same thing with the Soot. How at one point they're led to a point, and Cruella de Vil is actually after them as well. She discovers that the puppies are missing, and then she goes after them. Doesn't really so much mention the henchmen that much, but it does mention that Cruella de Vil is trying to go after them, and then you see the similar thing with the Disney version with the Soot, and how they put on soot so they don't get recognized, and then they try to go into a van so that they can get themselves home. And I think both versions seem to kind of maybe try to highlight the struggle of how they have to walk. But in the Disney version, they do it during the winter. I think this one plays out in winter as well, and they kind of do highlight the struggle of the puppies to like walk through the snow and the blizzard and all those things. But basically, they're led to the van by a particular dog. However, I think this dog is actually different, a different kind of dog than in the Disney version, and I don't believe it's mentioned that that's the dog's pets, because again, dogs refer humans as their pets. In the original work, he says that basically the owners of the van, are his pets, and that they'll let them go on. But they just kind of sneak on in the Disney version. It's kind of played into the idea that the owners don't really know what's going on, and then in a sense we get this car chase scene, which I think is actually really cool, and I like that Disney decided to go with that. But we don't see a car chase in the original version. They basically just hop on the van and go, and then they end up back in London. That's really how it pretty much goes. But I liked how Disney tried to maybe up it a bit and give it a little bit more intensity maybe. But in the original work, upon arriving in London, the dogs destroy Cruella de Vil's collection of animal skins and fur coats. with the aid of Corella's abused cat, the Dalmatians then return home. Once the dogs roll around to remove the soot from their coats, the Darlies recognize them and send for steaks to feed them. And basically, that's how it plays out too. In the Disney version, they come back and then they realize, oh, they have soot on, and then, oh, it's really these dogs are our dogs, and then they realize that there's just so many puppies. But in the Disney version, they just decide, oh, what the heck, we'll keep them. There's no reason. We'll keep them in all of our in this house. Yeah, we don't have much because again, Roger's a musician, but we'll take care of all of these 101 Dalmatians. Well, original work kind of plays into the end differently. In the end, basically, that the Darlies actually buy the house, the Hell Hall, and then they use that to take care of all of the puppies, because there's just so many puppies, and basically what makes them able to afford this is by Mr. Dearly money that was given to him by the government for sorting out another tax problem. So basically what he does is he just buys the estate, and they basically start a dynasty of Dalmatians and a dynasty of Dearlys to take and then the Perdita dog, the one again, because we have two female dogs here in the original work, she ends up finding her long lost love. I believe his name's Prince, and basically he then becomes the 101 Dalmatian, because in the original work there was only 97 that were held captive. So if you add 2 more, that's 99 for Pongo and Missy's. And then if you add 2 more, Perdita and Prince, you get 101. So that's how it really plays out, as 101 Dalmatians. Instead of in the Disney work where they just say, yeah, we got 99 for you, and and then Perdita and Pongo make 101. So that's really the main gist of the differences and similarities in this. But for the most part, characters are relatively the same, except again with these different names. But in the original work, there's 2 nannies. In the Disney work, only 1 nanny. And also the Disney work has other characters like Surgeon Tibbs, the cat, and the captain, which is basically a horse. And it just has more, I think, with how how they're really helped out. It seems like in the Disney work they do have spots where they're helped out, but for the most part, it seems like in the original work it only mentions the Colonel and the other dog that helps them towards the end, and who's a staff in the book. He's a Staffordshire Terrier, but I think he looks like a Lassie dog in the Disney version, who helps them get on board the van. So those are the really only 2 in the original work, but then Disney decides to add this cat, and I find it funny that they have Cruella de Vil actually have a cat or have an animal in the original work, but in the Disney work there's no hint of the fact that she has an animal at all, and you kind of get a sense of a little bit how animal rights was probably a concern of the person who was writing this book, as well as in the Disney version too. I think if you really are an animal lover, if you really like animals, this movie the Disney work will really appeal to you as well as the novel, because they are just so reflective, I think, in the same way as far as the messages are concerned, and as far as plot, it's the idea of animals being captured and then being rescued. It's that kind of a thing, and I think a lot of animal movies try to center around something of that sort. And sometimes they have a villain who's kind of, motivated for money, greed, similar with Cruella de Vil, who's obsessed with fur. It really basically plays in, for the most part, in the same way. It's just these little details, like certain names and certain characters. That's really how it ultimately factors into the differences. But when it comes to the overall picture is fairly the same. There's really no big major differences I could really say to you, except that it's just hiding in the details. It's just all dependent upon these little things. And sometimes Disney decides to use these little things to move the plot forward, or they won't use them because they don't feel like it would best represent itself in maybe a film. The opening of the Disney version I thought to be very fascinating. I really like the opening with the spots and everything. I think a lot of creativity was put in this particular Disney movie, and I think a lot of probably heart went into the book as well. It is a children's book, sort of, as far as categorizing the book is concerned. But it plays into that fact really well, and I think it for both versions it works. It's just these little details of how certain things really play out, and sort of the names onto the characters, and how ultimately the result of the 101 Dalmatians is kind of different in the Disney version, and more led into one direction that's more maybe concise than in the original work, where they sort of reveal already towards the end, oh, this is what makes the 101 Dalmatians, really. With the addition of these two other characters that are not even in the Disney version at all, Prince and Perdita, even though Perdita is in the Disney work, but it's not the same character in the original novel. But I think that's really all I can say about this one. This one was actually fairly easy, I think. I didn't think I'd be able to explain it this fast, but I think from what I told you, that's pretty much how it all works. I'm going to put all the links in the bottom so you can all watch and enjoy. And yeah, that's really all I could mention from what I've got, and what I was able to really address, and what I thought was really important necessarily to get out of the two. I think that's really all I can say. Any questions, comments, concerns, more than happy to answer them. And until next time, bye-bye, everybody.